I had a big incident with the West Side, with the Genovese family. When I got out of prison, my father was in Florida then, so it had to be like, I don't know, it was in the early 80s, maybe. It was probably, well, it was before he got arrested. He got arrested in 84, so I would say it was like 82 or 83. So what happened was, I was in the Richie Gotti's club with Tony Lee, and they were playing pinochle, and John Gotti had an appointment with this guy, Dom DeSailor, who was a wise guy with the Chins crew. And he had a club the Chins Club was on Sullivan Street. So I knew him. I knew Dom DeSailor through my father. So John had to bring money to him, that someone around my father and John owed him money, and they were supposed to bring him money. John had an appointment with him, so they were playing pinochle, and I went, and John looked at me and he says to me, "You know Dom DeSailor, right?" I go, "Yeah, I know Dom DeSailor." He goes, "Do me a favor." He said, "Take this money and go to Sullivan Street and bring him this money." I said, "Well, I don't have my car with me. I came with Tony Lee." So Tony Roach, who was a famous character, if you know anything about John Gotti, you always hear the name Tony Roach mentioned. He was crazy, Tony Roach. So he tells Tony Roach, Tony, drive Anthony to Sullivan Street. So me and Tony Roach get in the car. We drive to Sullivan Street. I walk in Sullivan Street, and Dom DeSailor is sitting at the table like this with his glasses on his nose like this, and he's looking at receipts, right? And he looks up at me and he says to me, "What are you doing here?" So I looked at him, "What am I doing here?" I said, John Gotti, John sent me." He goes, "Where's John?" I said, "He's busy." He goes, "Busy what, playing pinochle?" I said, so now I lied. I go, "No, he was busy." But he was playing pinochle. So he goes to me, "You can't talk to me. You ain't on my level." I go, "Listen." I said, "Listen, I'm not here to talk about levels. They brought me some money. They told me to bring this money to you. Here's the money. I don't want to hear that pulling rank bullshit." So I give him the money. He counts it. And I don't notice the money's short. Now, I don't know this, right? I don't even know what the figure was. The money's short. He counts the money. He takes his glasses. He goes, "The money's short." And he throws his glasses at me, and they hit me in my chest, and they bounce off onto the table. So I go, "What are you doing?" He jumps up and he throws the slap at me, and I grab his arm and I twist it behind his back, and I put him against the wall, and he's going. Tony Roach now starts running to hit him, and I tell Tony Roach, "No," because now I know the guy's a wise guy, right? He's old, and I told Tony Roach, "No, don't," right? And he's wiggling, so I tell him, "Dom, listen, if I let you go and you throw a punch at me, we're gonna hurt you." So I let him go, and he starts cursing out, "Get the fuck," and he's screaming. So we leave. We go back to Richie's club, and I walk in, and Jeannie sees me. Goes, "What happened?" I said, "What happened?" I said, "This guy threw a punch at me." Goes, "Doesn't he know who you are?" I go, "Yeah, he knows." He said, "Didn't he know you were Andy's son?" I said, "Of course he knows I'm Andy's son. That's why I went there." So so what do? John Gotti, Tony Lee, and Jeannie Gotti get me, put me in the car, and where do you think they took me? To the Ravenite. Right? I go in the Ravenite. I go in the back, tell Neil the story. I tell Neil the story. Neil tells me, "All right, tell me again." I tell Neil the story again. Now I repeat the story the third time. I go, "Neil, how many times do you want me to repeat the story? The guy threw a punch at me." Because now this is a big thing. This is another family that's not getting along with Neil, because there was a lot of friction going on with the Chin and all them. So this was a big issue, because I'm a wise guy's son, a well-respected wise guy's son. I'm with them. I'm with, that's our crew. And this guy threw a punch at me, So now it's a lot of shit's going on here, right? So Neil wants to make sure that I'm on point. I go, "Neil, I'm telling you what happened, right?" So now John's screaming, "I'll start a war over this." And he's screaming out of his mind, John Gotti. He's a captain at the time. And he's screaming, "I'm going to start a fucking war over this," right? So now I go outside to smoke a cigarette. And there's this guy outside, this old man that was a black hand guy. This guy was like from the turn of the century. He was like a dinosaur. His name was Mo Chink. He was a wise guy from like the 20s. He's out. He loved my father. This guy loved him. And I got goosebumps when I'm thinking about it. I walk outside, I smoke a cigarette. He walks up to me, he goes to me just like this. He goes, do you know where your father is? I go, yeah, he's in Florida. He goes, well, listen, go right now to a payphone, call your father, tell your father to come to New York immediately. He goes, and I'm telling you right now, don't go in anybody's car. Don't go on any appointments. Don't go anywhere with anybody. And I mean anybody, he tells me. Tony Lee, nobody. He told me, do not go with anybody. I looked at him, you don't have to, I got goosebumps. I said, yeah. I ran around the corner to a payphone. I called up my father. I told him what happened. He ran right to the airport. He got on a flight. He was in New York for 4 hours. He went right to the airport. He got on a flight. He came to New York. Where did we go? To the Ravenite, of course, with Neil. Talked. Then we went from the Ravenite to Sullivan Street, and we sat down with Tony Lee, my father, Dom DeSailor, and the Chin's brother. And the Chin's brother and me. And we sat down at a table, and he lied. Dom DeSailor lied. And my father looked at me and goes, my father said, that's not what happened. So Dom DeSailor goes, what do you mean? That's what, he goes, so Dom says, so what are you calling me, a liar? He goes, no, what are you calling my son a liar? He goes, listen, my son don't lie to me. He says, he said, my son don't lie to me. Now they're politicking because the Chin's brothers there. My father got up. He said, how much more money do you got coming? So he said the figure. My father took it out of his pocket. He threw it at the table, threw it on the table, and he told Dom DeSailor, if you ever put your hands on my son again, I'm going to put you right through the ground. He told him, I'm going to put you right through the floor. He told John, he goes, you want to politic with this guy? I'm not a politician. I'm a gangster. You see my tie? It's got a stain on it. He said, my father like this. He goes, I'm a gangster. I'm not a politician. He said, let's go. Me and Tim and Tony got up and we left. Where did we go? Back to the Ravenite. We walked in without John and everything. So Neil walked through this. Neil saw my father. He went like this. He put his head down. He shook his head. He said, what happened? My father goes, what happened? I left. I walked out. I threw the money at him. They want to politic. Let them politic. A little while later, John came back. He goes, what's wrong with you? So Neil was involved in a lot of stuff with us, throughout the years, and, I went to his funeral. My father was away when I went to his funeral. As a matter of fact, when I went to his funeral, I actually sat on the couch with Frankie Valli and Joe Pesci were there. And I was talking to them because I know Frankie. So they saw me, and Joe Pesci came to Neil's funeral with Frankie Valli. They're both from Jersey, I guess. So it was a Jersey thing. But, and that's it. Was at his funeral, and they buried him, and that was it. And then, John became the boss.